Hi, my name is Joseph Ogunfowokan. I'm a software and AI engineer with close to a decade of experience building some of the biggest softwares powering critical operations across various industries. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about ethics in AI. Ever since the release of ChatGPT in 2022, we've seen an exponential increase in the number of companies, applications, and processes that utilize AI. Most companies are now adopting an AI-first approach to problem solving. So, for example, companies who once prided themselves as having a 247 customer care department to handle user queries, they now use AI-powered chatbots to respond to users, even in productivity tools such as Office 365, Google Workspace, and so many other productivity tools. We've witnessed a surge, in the introduction or the use of AI-powered features. Currently, we even have job interviews hosted by AI bots, meaning AI now gets to decide whether a human is going to get a job or not. Companies that also previously offered, online courses taught by human instructors in the past, they're now exploring ways to replace these human teachers with AI. So a lot of people think that, AI is not so involved in our lives, but if you consider, even a recent study by McKinsey Global Institute, they say that by 2030, approximately 70% of companies worldwide will have adopted at least one type of AI technology. So we can only expect AI to become more and more integrated and involved in our daily lives, making autonomous decisions that affect millions or even billions of people globally. The truth is that AI already possesses significant power, and it's even going to possess greater power in the nearest future. But with great power comes great responsibility. Now, although this statement is easy to say, with great power comes great responsibility, this statement has actually raised more questions than answers, leading to the emergence of an entirely new field such as AI ethics. And in fact, that's one of the very reason that you're here listening to me today. When we say with great power comes great responsibility, a common question that arises is who exactly is responsible? Now, let's take a scenario. So let's say if an AI doctor wrongly diagnoses someone with a disease and prescribes the wrong treatment, thereby complicating the patient's condition, who exactly is to blame? Are we going to hold the AI accountable for its actions, or are we going to blame the people who created this AI? So the answer is not exactly as straightforward as it may seem. Whatever answer you give is only going to raise more questions. For example, if you say that we should hold the AI accountable, then how exactly are you going to do that? You have to remember that an AI is not a human, so it doesn't possess empathy or all those various emotions that guide human moral decisions. So take this for example. If let's say a human driver has an important meeting and then he has to drive all the way to work to his goal is to attend his meeting on time, but then he sees children crossing the streets. This person is going to stop because although his goal is to arrive on time, he also feels empathy and he fears the consequences of harming other people. So as humans, we have goals, but our humanity can override them because this driver, he has a goal of getting to his destination on time, but he sees people crossing the road. Now, although waiting for these people could prevent him from getting to his destination on time, even though his goal is to get to his destination on time, because of the humanity in him and then the empathy he has for these people, and even the fear of the consequence of harming these people, because if he rides over these school children, there's going to be a lot of consequences for his actions. Now this prompts him to stop, so his humanity can override his goal in this instance. But if you take, let's say, an AI powered vehicle for on the other hand now, and then let's say it has the sole purpose of getting its rider to work on time, so the person inside this car also has a very important meeting, and the sole purpose, the goal of this AI, this self-driving car, is to get, the rider or whoever is in the car to his destination on time. Now, when that AI is on the road, speeding, when it encounters these children on the road, these school children, it's going to see them as an obstacle which needs to be removed, because waiting for these children is going to prevent it from achieving its goal. So it's going to run over these children and it's not going to feel any remorse. So the consequence that will normally affect it emotionally, these consequences that will normally affect us it's not going to affect it because it does not have the same emotional response to this situation as we might have. And in fact, if it is faced with this same scenario again, it's going to take this same action without feeling any form of remorse. And whatever the consequence is, whether people die or people get injured, it's not going to affect it. So when you talk about holding AI accountable and you talk about consequences for actions, we have to understand that a lot of times the way consequences affects humans in the way it affects humans does not exactly apply to AI systems. So holding AI accountable for its actions, it leads to more questions and only complicates things. So for those also who believe that maybe the creators of this AI, whoever created this AI, should be responsible for its actions, another thing that you will have to understand is there's a principle in AI development. It's called the black box principle, and this principle essentially it refers to situations where an AI system's internal decision making process is hidden or difficult to understand, even when the inputs and outputs are clear. So a lot of times when AI engineers they develop AI systems, they train it on a vast data set. But what happens is that most times they cannot fully explain why the AI behaves exactly the way it does, and they cannot predict how it's going to reason or behave in every single scenario. So I mean, when they put in this data, when they train the AI on this data, what they see is that, okay, for this specific input, the AI gives us this output. Now, what happens in between when the AI takes in that input and how it reasons about it, whatever happens in between for it to give us the outputs that it gives us, most times the people who develop these AI systems don't exactly understand what happens in between. So they can't exactly predict every time that, okay, this is how this AI is going to behave under every circumstance. So it's just like a parent raising a child. They can teach them values, they can train them, they can tell them this is the way to behave and all that kind of stuff. But then what's going to happen is the parents cannot always predict how the child is going to behave in every single scenario. Even if the parent was the one who taught the child, was the one who trained and brought up the child, you can't tell what is going on in the child's mind at every single point in time. And because of that, certain children can take decisions. Maybe it's against the will of their parents. Now, their parents have taught them to behave in one particular way, but in certain scenarios, a child can take a certain action that may not be right. Now, who exactly are we going to blame in that situation? Are we going to blame the parents, even though we know that the parents have actually tried their possible best to instill, the principles, to instill certain values into these children, even though we know that the parents raised them well? Are we going to blame the parents for that? So that's also another thing that comes into consideration when we're talking about AI, in terms of, okay, are we going to blame the creators of this AI? Because can we blame them for not know, because they don't exactly know what goes on inside this AI. So we can't always say, okay, they are at fault for every single output that an AI produces. So all these are just some examples of this type of questions that comes up when we're talking about AI development. And these questions are what have led to the field of AI ethics. So when talking about AI ethics, what exactly is AI ethics? Now, I'm sure that if you're listening to these, you already know what AI is, because from the first week of this session, we've covered what AI is, but now we're going into what is AI ethics. So AI ethics actually is the study and the practice of ensuring that artificial intelligence systems are designed, developed, deployed, and used in ways that are fair, safe, and beneficial for people and society. So when talking about AI ethics, we're talking about the design. So it's not just now how this AI works or how this AI behaves in the real world. Well, it also is also involved in the design of this AI, because if we want this AI to behave in a way that is beneficial for humanity or for people in the society, the first step has to come from the design. We have to ask ourselves, how are we designing this AI? What are we designing it to do? What is the training data sets that we're using to create this AI? So we're also talking about how it is deployed. So we design this AI, how we're going to deploy it and all that. And it needs to be in a way that is fair. It needs to be in a way that is beneficial for people and also the society. So if let's say we look at the example from earlier about the AI car now, this AI car, its goal when they were designing this AI car, its goal was just to get the rider to his destination on time. Now that's how it was designed. But then we cannot just design an AI having a goal just to get someone to his destination on time, because then what happens in order to get that the rider to his destination on time, what steps is this AI going to take? Does the end justify the means? Because if the AI gets the rider to his destination on time, it has definitely achieved the goal. But what was the means through which it was able to achieve this goal? We have to ask ourselves this question, and we know that the end doesn't always justify the means. The fact that okay, it's the person was able to get to his meeting on time, but in order to do that, he had to ride over, school children, and then, thereby causing injury and harming a lot of people on the way. We know that even though this goal has been achieved, the we know that the process through which is achieved that goal isn't good, which is why in designing these AI systems, we're not just trying to specify the goal, we're also trying to specify the means, so that we can ensure that this AI behaves in a way that is beneficial to humanity. So this is what AI ethics, this is what it encompasses. The design, it takes right from the design stage to the deployment stage, right from where we're deciding on, okay, what training data sets are we going to use, because, that comes into the design where we're thinking about the architectures, the models that we're going to use, what kind of data are we going to use to train this AI, all these comes and then under the design, and even to when we now deploy this AI, out there and then people are using it, we still have to be asking ourselves, is this AI behaving in a way that is beneficial for, humanity? And if not, what can we do about it? So AI ethics is just essentially about asking, just because we can build an AI system, should we? And if we eventually build this AI system, how do we make sure that it is used responsibly? So not everything that can be built should be built. So that's what, that's another principle of, AI ethics. We can build an AI that can do certain things. For example, we can build an AI that can imitate someone. Maybe you can just put in a picture of someone, and then it's going to create a video or generate an image of this person, and then it can be used in various situations. It can be used to also implicate people. So, but the fact that we have the power to build an AI that can be used for this type of purpose doesn't mean we should, and then even when we eventually build an AI, let's say we build an AI system, we've seen that okay, this AI system is actually beneficial to humanity, maybe an AI that can diagnose diseases early. And then we also have to ask ourselves, okay, how do we use this AI? Because now we have something that is good, but we also have to use it responsibly, because the truth is that a lot of things that humanity has produced were produced with good intentions, but also is good intentions is good to have good intentions, but also people can take something that was produced out of good intentions and then use it for harm. So, for example, now let's say someone creates a knife. This knife can be used to cut fruits, cut vegetables. It can be used in the kitchen. But then there are also people that can now carry this and now use it for harm. So that's also how AI is. An AI system can be developed with very good intentions to diagnose diseases, to help people out and do all that. But then we can have people using these AI systems in ways that aren't just right. And so this also comes under AI ethics. We're asking ourselves, how do we ensure that we deploy it in such a way that people have to use this responsibly? So, maybe go back to the earlier scenario of the AI doctor. Yeah, we can also see that another question that we're going to ask ourselves, right, is who is going to bear the consequences of when this AI fails to act in a way that is in humanity's favor. So that's also something else that we ask ourselves when we're talking about ethics. AI ethics is also about consequences, because the truth is that a lot of times consequences are what makes people act responsibly. We see in the society today, in places where we have law and order, the reason for this law and order is because there's a system that has already been put in place where we have rules, we have a constitution, and then this constitution already defines that, all right, if someone does this that is against the constitution, if someone does XYZ, these are going to be the consequences. And so when there is no consequence, it's really hard to get people to behave responsibly, and which is why a core or a key part of AI ethics is also asking about, or who's going to bear the consequences. And most times we don't actually have all the answers to all these questions. When we're talking about, the AI doctor, when we also spoke about the self-driving car, there were a lot of questions that we raised up, about whether we blame the AI, whether we blame the person that developed it, and so many other questions too that we could have asked ourselves. And most times we don't actually have all the answers. That's the thing about AI ethics. That currently it's a field that is still being studied. It's something that is still being developed. People are sitting every day trying to, bring about new principles, regulations, and all that, because they are trying to fully understand these systems. The truth is that there's a lot of questions, and there seem to be more questions than answers. But then, even though we don't have all the answers, what we've done in the field of AI ethics is we now have certain principles that guide our reasoning. So when we are trying to answer certain questions, we check them against several principles that we have about AI ethics and how AI should be developed, and then we use these principles to guide our thinking and our reasoning about the development of this AI. And so I'm just going to mention a few of these principles in this lecture here today. So I'm going to mention seven actually. I'm going to be talking about seven of these core principles. So the first principle that I'm going to talk about is transparency. And transparency in AI really means making make the decision making process and the limitations of an AI system clear and understandable to the users, the regulators, and all the affected parties, everyone involved. So we want to disclose information like, maybe what type of data was used to train the AI, how does this AI make decisions. We may not be able to, be very, very exactly specific about the internal workings of an AI, but at least we should have an idea about how it was trained to, make decisions. Maybe we need to know something about its architecture and all that. We also want to understand what are the limitations and the risks of this AI and who is responsible for its output. So, this is about transparency. We want to ensure that all the information that people really need is put out there. Nothing is kept hidden that could, in the future now cause harm or will make people not to trust these AI systems. And these are all very important because, for example, now what data was used to train the AI? This is a very important question because at the end of the day, the way an AI is going to behave, the type of output an AI is going to give in large depends on the training data set, the type of data that was used to train the AI. So if let's say I want to create a large language model, something like ChatGPT. Now we have models like ChatGPT, which is very common. We have Grok and so many other AI models out there. These are LLMs or large language models. And essentially, let's say I want to create my own version of ChatGPT now, and then I'm definitely going to train it on a lot of text. So if I train this AI model on, let's say, text that contains harmful information, using words that are considered not appropriate, what's going to happen is that my AI is now going to be, whenever users ask it a question, the type of output that is going to produce is going to closely resemble the type of data on which I have trained it. So if I trained it on harmful text, if I trained it on text that contains hate speeches, things that are just generally aren't right, what's going to happen is that this AI is also going to behave in that manner. It's going to produce outputs, information that just aren't right, And so the type of data that was used to train an AI influences the AI in a very large extent, the type of outputs that is going to be produced by the AI in a very large extent. So, giving people some sort of insight into the type of data that was used to train an AI is very, very important. It also helps to prevent, bias. If you look at research now, a lot of research papers out there, when someone publishes a research paper, a lot of times they also tell you about, how they gathered information. If they took a survey, if they interviewed people, they're going to talk about the demographics, the type of people they interviewed. Okay, the type of people, if they only interviewed men, in this research work, they're going to tell you, okay, this interview was only conducted on men. If it was only black people, they're going to tell you it was only conducted on black people. If it was only on white people, they're going to tell you it was only on white people. Providing information about the nature of the data that was used in a research helps, because we know that at the end of the day, whatever output we get from a research depends on the type of people or the nature of the people that we interviewed. For example, it's possible that people will belong into a certain group. Now, let's say we interviewed a certain age group. So we're interviewing people within the age of, let's say people between 15 to 20 or something, or let's say people between 80 to 18 years old to 20 years old. There are certain types of experiences that those people will be having at that moment. Let's say those people are currently in university. In fact, let's say that we're interviewing university students. There are certain experiences that those people are going to be having that they can relate to, that if we are interviewing someone who is 5 years old cannot relate to. And so the way they're going to answer the questions are going to be different. So when we now arrive at a certain conclusion based on how we have interviewed these people give us a certain response. We have to make it clear that, okay, this interview was conducted on this group of people, so people can understand that this response or this conclusion that we have arrived pertains to this particular group of people and may not exactly apply to another group of people somewhere else. If we interview people living in a particular area, in a particular region where there's, even with a certain, let's say, they have access to certain resources, the way they are going to react to certain things, the way they are going to view their environment. If we ask them, hey, these people have access to all certain resources in their environments. If you ask them questions like, are you satisfied with your living conditions where you are living? Those people are going to answer with yes. When we go to another place where, people, they don't have access to, basic resources, basic things that they should aren't provided for them in wherever they are living, and we ask them, are you satisfied with your environment? The answer is most likely going to be no. So if, let's say, we're now interviewing people who are in that area where, they claim to be satisfied with their environment, that's simply because they have certain resources that are provided to to them. And so we cannot really take the result of that interview that, okay, these people, since they are satisfied with where they are living, we cannot now generalize it and now say, okay, everyone in the world is satisfied with where he's living, is satisfied with his living conditions, because that doesn't apply to everybody. This only applies to this group of people simply because it only applies to them because they have all the resources provided for them. And if, on the other hand, if we interview people that lack access to basic resources, let's say water and all that, they will not be satisfied with where they are living. But we cannot take their response and generalize it and now say, okay, in the world today nobody is satisfied with where they are living, because again, that's going to be false, because all these differences is just dependent on the data, the type of people that we interviewed. And this same thing too applies to AI. When we're training an AI model, the type of data that we use is going to affect the type of output that this model is going to return. So think about an AI model designed to diagnose diseases. If we trained it on one specific type of disease only, we need to make that clear that, look, this AI has only been trained to identify this type of disease, because when someone now wants to use it to identify another type of disease on which it has not been trained on, it could actually result in a lot of errors. And so a lack of understanding of the type of data that was used to train the AI can result in a lot of problems, and which is why it's very important for the people producing these AI models to be very transparent about the type of data that they use. And also we want to understand how it makes decisions, because the decision making process is extremely is actually important, because let's take an example of, let's say we have an AI powered lending platform. So let's say people can borrow loan now. So let's say, okay, people can borrow money. People can borrow money on this platform, right? And then everyone has a score. So people have a credit score. The longer it takes for you to repay your loan, of course, your credit score drops. If you aren't consistent in paying your loan, your credit score drops, and then it prevents the amount of loan you can take in the future, or it limits the amount of loan you can take in the future. So now, let's say now we have an AI that decides, okay, whether we're going to give someone a loan or not. So someone just coming on this platform and then asking for a loan, and then the AI just says, no, I'm not going to give you loan now, without any explanation or anything. That's not good enough. That's too opaque, because the person does not understand why this action was taken. If this action, if the AI is even wrong, it's going to be hard to prove that okay, this AI was wrong because no further explanation was provided. But if let's say the AI application now says, okay, you know what, due to your current that okay, your application is declined because your credit utilization is 85%, your debt income ratio exceeds 45%, and you have a late payment. So if the AI is telling you that okay, you have a late payment, you have paid your loan late in the last 12 months, it's giving you the numbers, and then it now tells you, okay, we're not going to accept your application for loan. And now you understand why this action was taken. Even if you look at, content moderation now on various social media platforms now, various social media platforms, they have policies, they have guidelines, and a lot of times when people break any of their policies, what happens is that a lot of times maybe they ban this user or they suppress their post or something. So a lot of times people just open their social media app, they just open the app, log into their accounts, and then they see that wow, they can't access their account, they've actually been banned from these platforms. And what happens a lot of times is people are not provided with a specific reason as to why they were banned from these platforms. Right now, these people, they probably have an AI system there that decides, okay, if it's checking their users' activities, and if it seems like someone is violating their policies, then it's going to ban the person. But then a lot of times what happens is people can't really learn from their mistakes. They don't know what they did wrong that made this system to ban them from this platform, and they're probably going to repeat that mistake again. And even if the AI made a mistake, they want to know that it's made a mistake because they haven't been provided with enough information about the process that the AI went through to make this decision. They don't understand the decision making process, and so that's also limits a whole lot of that causes a whole lot of problems. But if these companies, if the people producing these AI models are very transparent about the reasoning process of this AI, and they're able to tell us, okay, the AI is able to say, so we are banning you because you have violated section 4 of our policy guidelines and all that, it's going to help because we'll be able to better identify errors in these AI systems, and then it's going to prevent wrongly accusing people of things that they haven't done. And also, it's very important for companies and people producing these AI models to be very transparent about what are their limitations and risk. If there's a certain risk involved in using an AI system, it's very important that they are very clear about it, they are transparent about it, because if let's say there's a limitation, an AI model that was trained to diagnose disease cannot diagnose a certain type of disease. If this limitation is not made clear, what's going to happen is that people will now be using this model to attempt to diagnose a disease in which it wasn't trained to diagnose. And what's that going to lead to? It's just going to lead to complications and all that. And so this lack of transparency about things like this could actually result in much more it could result in much more catastrophe. And another principle, that we have to follow in AI ethics is fairness and non-discrimination. And fairness and non-discrimination in AI just means that these AI systems treat people equally without giving unjust advantages or disadvantages to a specific individual or group based on characteristics like maybe race, gender, age, or socioeconomic status. So we have to ensure that okay, the AI's training data set does not contain certain bias that could go unrecognized but then begin to affect the AI model. So AI models, they are trained on data, but then these models, they observe patterns in this data. And what happens most times is that when you look at this data, you're just looking at this with your human eye. You don't observe. A lot of times it's very difficult to spot out the bias that exists in this data. But when we begin to use this data to train models, this bias begins to become a lot more pronounced and a lot more obvious. It just limits this AI model, and then this AI model will take certain decisions not based on how it should be, but because it's just that the data set it has been trained on was biased or maybe skewed in a particular direction, and then this AI model is just going to eventually, the behavior is going to be affected by the bias that exists in that data. So if we look at a real world example now, there was a very big company that created an AI that was going to help them in their hiring process. So because they have a lot of candidates submitting resumes. They have to deal with thousands of applications, and then it's just very hard for people, human beings, to actually sit down and begin to go through all the thousands of resumes that have been submitted by people who are looking for a job in that company. And so they decided, okay, let's create an AI model that is going to help us, to identify who is a proper candidate for this job. And so exactly what are they even going to do? That's create a model. They have to train this model on data. Where are they going to get this data from? It's historic data. What is based on the data that they have used on how they have been operating in the past. So now all the people that have been employed at that particular company, they have their resume, and then they know who was accepted, who was rejected. So they just feed this data into the AI. The AI looks at this list of resumes, observes how a user that was retained by this company, a user that was actually employed by this company, how their resume looked. It sees, okay, the people who were rejected by the company, sees how their resume looked, and it begins to understand, okay, what qualities, what attributes is this company looking for. So it can now autonomously make decisions on who to employ in the future. And so they trained this AI model on this data. When something began to happen, this AI model, what now happened, what they now began to realize later on is that when someone submits their resume, if this resume contains any term relating to women in it, it reduces that person's chances of getting the job. So it downgrades that person's resume. So if, let's say, the person says, okay, I was the captain of the women's sports in my school or something like that, or women's football, that person now has a lower chance of getting the job. And why is that? That's because what they now realized was that previously this company had more male employees than female employees. So they had accepted more male, of course, they had accepted more people who applied for the job. When people applied for the job, they actually accepted more males than females. And so they did not realize that, but by the time they started feeding this data into the AI to train it, the AI was able to pick up this bias that exists in this data, that, okay, we need to employ more men than women. Nobody specifically told the AI that, hey, you got to employ more men than women here. But again, it was just able to, it was able to pick up this pattern in the data. And so when it realizes that, okay, when the AI realizes that, look, we're dealing with a male here, it increases the person's chances of getting the job. And when it now sees that, okay, this is a woman who submitted this resume, it's downgrades that resume, and the chances of her getting the job is becomes extremely low. So we can see like gender bias now in this hiring process, in this AI that was developed. And this is even like an extreme case, because in even much more simpler, on your social media feed, we have like recommendation algorithms, we have various things, cameras and things like, what data has these things been trained on? Take facial recognition, for example. Now, let's say there's a facial recognition software being developed in the US. Now, most likely, the people that they are going to be testing this facial recognition software with are going to be people who are residing in the US. And the majority of the people residing in the US are white people. So chances are this is going to be trained on more, the data is going to be trained on, is going to contain more white faces than, black faces or Asian people or Asian faces. And what's going to happen is that this model could actually perform well maybe in the US, but by the time you now begin to bring it into a country like Nigeria, or other African countries where majority of the people are black, what's going to happen is that it begins to make a lot of mistakes. There begins to be a lot of errors that the people who develop the AI model will not even have thought about this from the beginning. They wouldn't have identified these errors, these mistakes, because they have been training and been testing it on data or that contains images of white people, but then it just doesn't work when you now take it into another context. And so this is what we're talking about bias. So the type of data that we're using to train the AI model, it has to be free from bias, and that is why we're talking about a principle here called fairness and non-discrimination. Because in order for an AI to be fair and not to discriminate against anybody, the data all starts with data. The data needs to be non-biased, and the truth is that it's very hard to know when the data is biased, because a lot of this data is gotten from real world situations, and what we know about real world situations is that there isn't always equality. I mean, in the world, people are fighting for equity and equality in various in various forms, but what we know is that in the world it isn't always equality. And so where you're getting this data from, you're not going to manufacture this data. It's going to be gotten from real world scenarios, real world circumstances. And so that lack of equality, that biasness that already exists in the world today is going to reflect in that data, which is now going to further reflect in the AI that we're going to develop. Another principle that we're going to look at is accountability. So accountability is just making sure that a specific person, team, or organization can be held responsible for the design, deployments, and the outcomes of an AI system. So especially when this AI affects people's lives in very important areas like healthcare, finance, law enforcement, and other very important areas. Because if an AI model, for example, an AI system that was meant to help someone out, let's say it begins to, or let's say I was meant to perform surgery or something, it makes a mistake, it does it in a wrong way, and then it leads to loss of lives and property. There has to be people have to be held responsible, because there has to be some sort of compensation to the victims of this AI, of the mistakes or the wrong outcomes of these AI models. So people need to be held responsible, and it's just very difficult for people to trust an AI model or an AI system when there's no one to be held responsible, because you can just look at it from the like a warranty now. When when you go to buy a product, let's say you go to buy a phone, you go to buy a refrigerator or whatever it is that you go to buy, and then the seller tells you, okay, we have a 1 year warranty on this product. So if you take these products and then it gets it's not behaving as it should, it's not serving these products, let's say you take it and then it gets damaged, not due to any fault of yours, but maybe due to manufacturing errors and all that, you can actually come and return this product to the seller, and then they're going to give you a brand new one. Now, buying a product that has warranty, people trust it a whole lot more than when they buy products that don't have warranty, because when a product doesn't have warranty, now it's a lot more risky, because whatever happens, there's no one you can hold responsible. And even though now you aren't the one to blame, you just bought these products and then now it isn't working well, you now have to bear the consequences, or there's no one that's gonna like step in and actually take responsibility for this thing. And so that's just how accountability in AI is. It's kind of like a warranty. So we need to be it to be clear who is going to take responsibility. If something goes wrong, who's going to be held responsible for it? Because if an AI system leads to damage of property, people will come home, all their investment is gone. Definitely they need to be compensated for that. Who is going to compensate them? Who's going to take responsibility for that? It's very important for all these to be made extremely clear from beginning. And another principle is privacy, and privacy is like extremely important. It's something that there's a whole lot of conversation surrounding privacy in currently, because with technology, as technology is becoming a lot more advanced, even AI relies on data. And these data, where are they going to get it from? These are most likely going to be people's data. So privacy is trying to ensure that these artificial intelligence systems, they collect, they store, and they process data, and they use personal data in a way that protects individual rights and complies with various data protection laws. So these AI systems, in order to develop these AI systems, they rely heavily on data. Take your social media feed, for example. Now it shows you things that you're interested in. How does your social media platform, how do they know what you're interested in? Is because as you're using this platform, as you click on something, as you spend time watching something, it's actually studying you, it's observing, it's beginning to understand what are you interested in. And when it understands what you're interested in, it's just going to keep giving you contents that it believes you're interested in. The type of ads that are going to show up are going to be based on things that you're interested in. So if you ever go on an e-commerce platform, you're trying to get a new laptop, and then you search for laptop or something, later on you'll see, when you go to other websites, you go across the internet, you begin to see a lot of recommendations for laptops. That's because you're beginning to understand that, wow, you're now interested in laptop, and so that's what they want to show you. So a lot of times these platforms, they hate taking your personal data and then they use it to actually improve on the platform. But then taking in people's people's personal information, although when you look at it, it's actually for the good of the users, because it helps these platforms to be more adapted to, who you are. These platforms are able to, more or less meet your needs. They're able to meet your needs more because now they have a better understanding of who you are based on based on your data that they have captured. And it also helps in developing these models and making it a lot better for the community and for other people who are going to be using these AI systems. So as AI relies heavily on data, like your location, your browsing history, maybe your health records, biometric data and all that. Now, this leads to a lot of problems. First of all, misuse or leaks, because these AI systems, they capture all your data. What happens if someone hacks into that system and is able to get access to your data? So let's say a healthcare system now, someone can hack into it. They can see all your personal, medical records, things that were never meant to be public can now be made public, and that just isn't good. It can lead to identity theft because someone could steal your ID, if you got your international passport stored somewhere, someone could steal like all this information about you, because now they are going to have your name, they have your age, they have your address, they've got a lot of information about you. So anyone can pretend to be you, in another context, in another scenario. Anyone can, after stealing your information, they can then pretend to be you because they know enough about you to prove that they are you, right? So this is where identity theft comes in, and it's just very bad, because even beyond hacking, hacking is even very extreme. The people who are training these AI models, when you use these platforms and then you supply your data to these people. Now, possibly they may have may have people, some AI engineers who are going to be responsible for labeling this data, and so they may have access to your data, maybe images or whatsoever, and then they may need to label this data, use it to improve on the model. So we're having like actual human beings now gaining access to your data, and if they even do this without your consent, that even makes it a whole lot worse. And there's also a legal aspect of this. When you see, for example, if you go to if you visit a therapist now, you talk to the therapist, you finish your session with the therapist. So now if later in the future now there's this person needs to show up in court, let's say for whatever situation or whatever, it's very hard for the opposition to use this person's records, this all his sessions with the therapist against him, because now therapy sessions, medical records, they are protected by certain laws, and not just anyone can gain access to these things under just any circumstance. But when you are talking about AI now, AI models, your conversations with these models, they may not be protected. They are not protected by the exact same laws in which, your the sessions, your conversation with your therapist, the same regulations that protect those sessions with your therapist. Your sessions or your conversation with these models, such as ChatGPT, is not being protected by those laws. So if the court now demands for these companies to provide your data to be used in a particular court case, they will have to provide those data. So this is where privacy now comes in. So how private are the what you're using, whatever you're using the AI for, how private exactly is it? So these are questions that come up, and so these are just things that you have to consider when looking at AI ethics, privacy and all that. And if you want to look at some even real life scenarios that have happened, you can look at the Cambridge Analytica in 2018, very very popular example. So in 2018, Cambridge Analytica, they harvested data from millions of Facebook users without their consent, and they used it to create a psychological profile of these users, for targeted advertising. And what was the problem with these? The problem is that users did not know that their data was being collected and sold, and the data was used for purposes that the users never agreed to, such as election interference. And this is the power of data. If I'm able to get enough data on you, and I'm able to develop a psychological profile of you, I understand the type of decisions that you are most likely to make, and then if there's an election coming up, I can predict who you are going to vote for based on all your data and based on how maybe you've been using platforms, the type of posts you like, what you interact with, the type of videos you watch. People can develop a profile and know, okay, this is who this person is, these decisions is most likely to make. And based on all this data, people can influence your actions. They can say, okay, this person, this is his personality, this is who he is, this is the type of decision he's making, but I want him to make a different decision now. I want him to make this other type of decision, and then based on your data, they can expose you to certain contents, just deliver certain content to you that is going to maybe change the way you think, and then it can be observed, how various changes to the way you're interacting with these platforms. And so people can use your data to set you up for things. You're going to think that, okay, you're making an independent decision. Okay, you're going to think that, look, this decision I'm making right now is the decision that I want to make, not knowing that, okay, look, people based on your data are actually guiding you, and based on the contents they show you, into making a particular type of decision. So just think about how bad that is. So this is where privacy concerns comes in, because when people's personal data gets in the wrong hands, I mean, there's no telling what they could use it for. They could use it for very, very terrible things. And another principle, again, when looking at you know ethics in AI, again, is safety and reliability. So we have to ensure, this involves ensuring that AI systems work as intended. They avoid causing harm, they can remain dependable even under unexpected conditions, or even when people attempt to misuse it. So we just need to ensure that, okay, this AI is dependable. If I create an AI to do A, this AI is going to do A and not B under certain circumstances. And even when people attempt to misuse this AI, that this AI can respond in a way that prevents misuse. So, for example, in ChatGPT now, or some other large language model, maybe people may want to use it for certain illegal purposes. They may want to ask the AI how to do something that is illegal. Now, these people that produce these AI models, they might have put some checks there, to ensure that, okay, people don't misuse this AI. But then we have to ask ourselves, can people actually trick this AI into behaving in a way in which it wasn't designed to behave? If yes, then can we really say that this AI is reliable, or even just an AI not even performing the way it should? For example, in 2018, a particular company, they were performing, a test on an autonomous vehicle, and what they realized was that this autonomous vehicle failed to perform as it should. In fact, there's one in real life case where this autonomous vehicle was moving on the road, and then we had a pedestrian passing by, pushing his bike. And what happened was that the vehicle failed to classify this pedestrian, is misclassifying the pedestrian, essentially, because these AI cars, they have sensors, they have cameras. So maybe when the camera captures a person, it classifies this person as, okay, this is a person, this is a pedestrian, so I'm not supposed to hit this person. When it sees the street lights or the traffic lights, it classifies it, this is traffic lights, whatever, it's red I have to stop, it's green I need to go, and all that. But then someone was pushing his bike, and then for some reason this AI powered car just didn't, it just misclassified the person, and it led to an accident. And of course, after that, they sued the company, and it just led to a whole lot of problems. And then so you can see, like, a lack of reliability coming into play here. I mean, these are situations very, very these are very important situations where the decisions that the AI model, that this AI is taking, it's very important, because a self-driving car, every decision it takes on the road is extremely important. Whether it chooses to hit an object or not hit an object is very important, because that object could be a human being, and hitting someone could cause very serious consequences. Because I mean, it could lead to injury, or even worse, it could lead to death. So every decision that these AI, every decision they make is extremely important, and so we have to ensure that it is reliable and it is making the right decisions at all times. And another another example that we can see is chatbot misinformation. So we have chatbots giving people dangerous medical or legal advice. So people they open up whichever chatbots, they type in there, they say, look, I have these symptoms, what should I do? Maybe the chatbot doesn't really understand it. It tells them to take a particular drug when they're not meant to take that particular drug, and that drug just complicates things for these people. So and you may even give them wrong legal advice, and then it leads to a whole lot more complications. And it just makes the situation a lot worse than it was. And another principle again that we look at in ethics in AI is human oversight. So human oversight means keeping people in the loop for critical decisions. So we have an AI. This AI has been trained to respond in certain situations, to handle certain tasks, but it's still very important to ensure that there's a human there to check and ensure that okay, every decision that this AI is making, it's the right decision. So human oversight, so keeping people in the loop for critical decisions, so that the AI just acts as a support tool rather than the final authority, especially in situations where errors could have serious consequences, maybe for health, safety, or even to your finances. So for example, in a healthcare diagnosis system, it's going to diagnose a patient. Maybe we develop an AI to diagnose the patients, but instead of the AI just, telling the patients that, look, I think you have this condition and this is what you should do about it. The model should instead give these results. There should be a doctor, a certified medical doctor on ground, and the model should just give these results to the doctor, so the doctor can now examine it and then see, okay, the reasoning why the AI arrived at this decision, and then decide, now make the final decision. If it's wrong, if the decision if what the AI is saying isn't right, then the doctor can now correct that. But then if it's right, so they can go ahead with it. So this kind of prevents errors that could have easily be prevented if there was human oversight. And in a self-driving car too, or even let's say aviation autopilot, so there's a plane, and then they have an AI system that's so the plane can be on autopilot, the plane can ride itself. But it's still very important to have a pilot there, that can take control of the plane at any time, so that if the AI system makes a decision that isn't right, that could lead to a plane crash, then these pilots could take over and now correct that. Or because if there's no pilots on ground, it could lead to a plane crash, it could lead to just very terrible things. And so it's very important to have human oversight at all times. And another principle is beneficence. So we're just looking at, in this principle, was we just want this AI system to act in a way that promotes human well-being and safety. So this system should act in a way that is for societal good. So rather than an AI system only being used at the expense of people, maybe it's used for profit or for efficiency at the expense of people, we should ensure that, okay, we prioritize people in every AI system that we're making. So if, let's say, we create an AI system that can do a certain job with, a high degree of accuracy, now that could actually lead to other people who are currently doing that job, humans who are currently doing that job, to lose their job, because now there's now an AI that can do the job of humans, right? So if we decide to choose efficiency over people, so we begin to ask ourselves questions: is this actually serving humanity, this AI model? Because it leads to loss of jobs. Now, is this model actually serving humanity, or are we are we just sacrificing humanity just to make more profits? So these are questions that we are going to have to ask ourselves when in AI ethics, when talking about ensuring that we develop AI that is beneficial for humanity. So this is supposed to guide developers, policy makers, and people involved, so that when they are developing AI, they develop it with a certain mindset. So when we look at models that are solving problems, we look at things like Google's DeepMind. They have a Google's DeepMind eye disease detection tool is able to identify retinal diseases earlier than traditional methods. And so it can prevent blindness for thousands of people by enabling earlier treatments. Now, this is something that is actually solving a problem. It's detecting, blindness before it occurs, leading to early treatments. And then people who would have been blind because of this AI model now, they they are able to treat these things, these diseases early on. So this is like an example of something that is benefiting humanity. So I'm just gonna round up this session with, a few case studies, on, so we can, better, so just to test all the knowledge that we've gained on, ethics in AI. So let's the first scenario I'm going to give, the first case study is in predictive policing and privacy. So now predictive policing is essentially, creating an AI to forecast where crimes are likely to happen or who might commit these crimes. So imagine that you are called upon, you're an AI ethics expert, and then a company to tell you that, look, I want to produce an AI model that is going to predict who is going to commit a crime before the person commits the crime. So that way we can respond faster to crime, and it's going to reduce crime rate. So now, on paper that sounds good, right? A lot of people are going to be happy about that. But as an AI ethics expert, how are you going to approach this? Now, you have to see that although this sounds good on paper, but most likely it's just going to reinforce existing bias, because basically if this data is being trained on previous, crime data, it may there's a chance that, okay, perhaps maybe a certain race or a certain tribe or a certain group of people may be known by the general public for a certain type of crime. And so what's going to happen now is when you train an AI on that type of data, it sees someone who belongs to that ethnic group or who belongs to that race or this particular socio-economic group of people, and it can suspect them for this crime even before they have committed the crime. And then even though these people may never commit this crime, maybe these people are different, they're innocent, but then because of those bias, those stereotypes that already exist in the society and is going to make its way into this data, that same stereotype is going to reflect in these AI models, and it's just going to make things bad. Because I mean, we usually say innocent until proven guilty, but imagine developing an AI that will predict who is going to commit a crime before the person commits the crime. So it's already flagged someone as being guilty even before the person commits the crime, with no knowledge about whether this person may even end up committing that crime. So now it's more now like guilty until proven innocent, which is not how it should be, right? And so these are like things, these are scenarios that people could be faced with if you are an AI ethics expert. And the last scenario that I'm going to talk about today, which I'm not going to answer it, I'm going to leave it to you, so that just brainstorm on it, and then think about what you're going to do in this particular scenario. So now just imagine that you're an AI ethics expert, right? And then there's a hospital, they have developed an AI tool that can diagnose certain illnesses faster than human doctors. But during the testing process, they now discover that, okay, this system sometimes misclassifies rare diseases. So although, yeah, the system can help, identify certain illnesses faster than human doctors, there's some diseases that it just gets wrong. It's not able to classify it well. And now this hospital, they want to launch this tool quickly. They're under pressure to launch it quickly. And then, they're talking about how it's going to benefit thousands of patients worldwide. So now you're the lead ethics advisor in this case. What are you going to do? Are you going to approve the launch with disclaimers? Are you going to say, okay, you know what, let's launch this tool, even though sometimes it won't be able to classify these diseases correctly, and then you're just going to put a disclaimer that, okay, this can make mistakes, right? But then you also have to realize that, look, you remember when ChatGPT came out, they put it there that ChatGPT can make mistakes. There was a disclaimer, but a lot of people still went ahead to fully trust every single response that ChatGPT gave them, regardless of that disclaimer. So another option that you have now, are you going to delay until the accuracy improves? So you say, you know what, let's not launch this AI model. Let's wait till it's fully accurate. Also remember that every time you delay the release of this model, there are certain people out there that this model could have helped, this AI could have helped, but because you are delaying it, it's not going to be able to help them. Remember, if you launch early, it could lead to, loss of maybe lives. It could lead to them certain severe consequences. If you delay it, also it could lead to severe consequences. Or are you only going to launch, in a low risk setting? So maybe you're just going to do maybe a pilot launch in like one hospital, or with dealing with one type of disease, something like that. Is that what you're going to do? So these are things that you have to think about. And I'm definitely not going to answer this question. I'm going to leave it to you, to the audience, to think about it, brainstorm about it during your free time and answer it. So you have to think about, the risk versus reward. There's a risk, there's also a reward. You have to think about the patient safety, informed consent, and all the various things that we have studied today under AI ethics. So we have come to the end of this lecture. Thank you for listening.